In today's fast-paced world, where noise is everywhere, be it from the constant buzz of social media, the hustle of everyday life, or the chatter in our own minds, it can be difficult to find a moment of peace. We are often overwhelmed by external distractions, as well as the internal noise that constantly pulls our attention in 1,000 different directions. But what if I told you that the key to unlocking clarity, focus, and inner peace lies in something as simple and powerful as silence? Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a powerful tool for self-discovery, reflection, and connection. In this video, we'll explore how silence, when applied intentionally, can transform your life, helping you navigate conflict, improve your decision-making, and even enhance your relationships. If you're ready to embrace the power of silence and transform the way you approach life's challenges, hit that like button and subscribe to the Buddhist Balance channel for more insights on mindfulness, personal growth, and inner peace. Let's dive into how you can use silence as a tool for clarity in your everyday life. The story. The story begins with a famous Buddhist teacher residing in a large hermitage in a tranquil village. He is surrounded by a group of disciples. Among them was one disciple who stood out, not for his devotion or wisdom, but for his constant chatter. He was always speaking, whether it was recounting stories from his visits to local homes or gossiping about his fellow disciples. He was known for boasting about his intelligence. He tried to present himself as superior to the others, all while outwardly playing the humble and selfless disciple in front of the teacher. This disciple's behavior can be compared to many in history. They felt the need to assert their superiority through words. Think of someone like Socrates in ancient Greece. He questioned everything but understood that true wisdom came from knowing that he knew nothing. In contrast, the disciple in this story tried to create an illusion of wisdom through endless talk, rather than quiet reflection or introspection. One day, the teacher called all the disciples together and announced a challenge. He told them that each disciple had to make a resolution, a vow, to be followed for the next month. The goal was simple. The resolution would test and strengthen their willpower and inner strength. The disciples, eager to prove their commitment, each selected their vow, big or small, depending on their abilities. But the talkative disciple, full of arrogance and wanting to demonstrate his greatness, stepped forward and asked for something far more challenging. "I don't want a small resolution," he said. "Give me something worthy of my abilities." His voice was full of confidence, his posture assured, as if he believed he could handle any challenge the teacher gave him. This attitude is not unlike that of historical figures who were known for their hubris, like Napoleon Bonaparte, who often overestimated his own abilities. Just like this disciple, Napoleon believed he could conquer the world. But eventually, he learned that ambition alone is no substitute for wisdom and self-awareness. The teacher, understanding the disciple's pride, smiled and said, "Are you sure you can fulfill the resolution I give you?" "I have my doubts." "I can do anything," the disciple replied, full of confidence. With that, the teacher gave him a simple yet profound challenge. "Your vow will be to remain silent for the next month. Not a single word will come out of your mouth. At first, the disciple was surprised. He thought to himself, "Is this really a challenge? It sounds so easy." He had no idea what he was getting into. This is often the case with many of us. We think we know ourselves, but we rarely understand the depth of challenges until we face them directly. The teacher's challenge wasn't just about physical silence. It was about the discipline of the mind. The ability to control one's impulses and thoughts. In a modern context, think of figures like Mahatma Gandhi. He practiced deep self-discipline and nonviolence. Gandhi's silence was not just a matter of not speaking, but a way of transforming his inner world, using silence to foster peace within and around him. Reluctantly, the disciple agreed and began his vow of silence. Initially, he found it easy. For the first couple of days, he felt proud of his self-control. But as the days wore on, the pressure started to build. His mind, which had always been full of words, now felt stifled. The chatter of the ashram, the conversations among his fellow disciples, began to seem unbearable. He longed to share his thoughts, to assert himself, but he couldn't. He was trapped by his vow. This struggle is not foreign to us. In our fast-paced, modern world, we are constantly bombarded with information, notifications, and expectations. It can be incredibly difficult to just stop and be still. In the same way the disciple felt trapped by his vow, many of us feel trapped by our need to constantly engage, to speak, to defend our positions, and to be heard. Silence feels unnatural, even painful, because we have conditioned ourselves to believe that speaking is power. On the third day, the disciple felt an overwhelming urge to break his silence. His head started to throb with the pressure of unspoken words. He felt desperate. His mind raced with thoughts, with a strong desire to speak. The isolation of silence began to feel like a prison, and he could not bear it anymore. He went to the teacher and wrote, "I cannot breathe without speaking. I am going insane. What should I do? Should I break my vow?" The teacher smiled again, recognizing the internal struggle the disciple was facing. "Resolutions are made to be broken," the teacher said. "But those who can fulfill their vows, who have the strength to follow through, move forward on the path of awakening. If you can't complete this vow, you may return to your old ways. But remember, if you cannot control this small vow, how will you ever manage the bigger challenges of life?" This moment is a turning point in the story, and it's a powerful lesson for us all. It's easy to make promises or resolutions, but it's much harder to follow through, especially when the path is difficult. It's in these moments of struggle that we truly learn about ourselves, about our strength, our weaknesses, and our character. Just as Thomas Edison persisted through thousands of failures to invent the light bulb, this disciple's persistence in silence would be his test of true strength. Hurt by the teacher's words, the disciple withdrew. He locked himself in his hut, only emerging for the essential tasks. For the next 15 days, he fought against his urges. The silence became more difficult, but he stayed with it. And by the end of the month, something remarkable happened. while most of the other disciples had broken their resolutions. This talkative disciple had not uttered a single word. This is where the true transformation began. The disciple had thought that silence was simply about not speaking. But he now realized that silence was not just an external discipline, it was an internal one. By forcing himself to stop speaking, he began to confront the noise in his own mind. His thoughts, his ego, his need for validation, all of it became more apparent. And as he faced these inner struggles, he began to experience something deeper, something more profound: peace. This part of the story illustrates a powerful truth. True silence isn't just about holding back words. It's about mastering the internal noise that drives us. The challenge of silence teaches us more about ourselves than we might realize. The disciple's journey mirrors many of our own. How we often seek external validation. How we hide behind words to mask our fears. And how silence can be a pathway to self-discovery. In the next part of this exploration, we'll dive into the ways this discipline of silence can reshape our lives, offering modern examples of how individuals like Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa used inner silence to shape their transformative legacies. The power of silence, a deeper dive. 1. The struggle of silence, understanding our inner noise. At first, the disciple thought that keeping silent would be simple. But as the days passed, he began to realize just how difficult it was to maintain silence. Not because he couldn't refrain from speaking, but because his mind became more restless. While his lips remained sealed, his thoughts became louder. This is a struggle we all face when we try to slow down or embrace silence. Our internal noise often becomes overwhelming. When we try to stop speaking, we are often confronted with a much bigger challenge: the noise inside our minds. The disciple thought that by stopping external communication, he would find peace. But instead, he found himself drowning in a sea of thoughts, desires, and anxieties. This reflects a common human experience. When we silence ourselves outwardly, the noise inside often becomes more pronounced. The more we try to quiet our exterior, the louder the internal voices grow. Many of us avoid silence because we are afraid of what it will bring up inside. Silence forces us to face unresolved emotions, fears, and thoughts that we have pushed aside. It's much easier to talk, to keep busy, or to distract ourselves, than it is to sit quietly and listen to what's truly going on inside. This is the essence of why silence is so difficult. It isn't just about not talking, but about confronting our own inner chaos. A similar dynamic can be observed in the lives of many influential thinkers. Take Albert Einstein, for instance, who, despite being one of the most brilliant minds in history, valued solitude and silence as a space for deep reflection. For Einstein, silence was not just a break from external noise, but an essential tool for creativity and introspection. Silence, in this sense, is not just about stopping the external sound but finding the space to listen to ourselves. 2. The urge to speak, a mask for our inner insecurities. As the disciple continued his vow of silence, his inner restlessness grew. It wasn't just the pressure to speak that troubled him, it was his constant desire to present himself to others, to be seen as intelligent and important. This deep craving to speak wasn't just about communication, it was about self-affirmation. He wanted others to recognize his worth, to see him as superior and exceptional. He needed to feel validated. This is an experience many people can relate to, especially in today's world. Often, we speak not because we have something important to say, but because we want to be heard. The constant flow of words and opinions we see in media, social platforms, or in daily conversations is not always about communication, it's often about seeking recognition, approval, or validation. We want others to acknowledge our ideas, to affirm our self-worth. The disciples' desperation to speak is a reflection of this need for external validation. Just like historical figures such as Friedrich Nietzsche, who sought to constantly assert his ideas to be recognized for his intellectual superiority, the disciple was driven by the need to prove himself. Nietzsche's philosophy, particularly his concept of the will to power, underscores the idea that people often feel compelled to assert themselves to achieve recognition in the world. Similarly, the disciples' words were driven not by a need to communicate but by an internal insecurity, his need to be validated by others. In the modern world, this dynamic plays out in social media culture, where people often feel the need to constantly share their thoughts, ideas, and experiences. This incessant desire to speak is often a mask for an inner void or insecurity. The disciple, in his struggle to remain silent, mirrored this desire to assert himself, to fill the emptiness with words. 3. The pressure of silence, a tool for self-discovery. As the disciples' vow of silence continued, the pressure of not speaking began to take a toll on him. What seemed like a simple resolution had now become a struggle for his very sense of identity. He had to face the unbearable truth that he had been relying on words not just for communication, but for personal validation. The more he resisted speaking, the more intense his feelings of frustration and anxiety became. This intense struggle is something we can all understand when we attempt to embrace stillness or practice mindfulness. Initially, it feels like we are taking control of our thoughts. But soon, the mind begins to resist. In these moments of struggle, we are faced with the uncomfortable reality of how much we have relied on external distractions or approval to define who we are. For the disciple, the vow of silence became a mirror, forcing him to look inward and recognize his dependency on external validation. The Guru's advice, that resolutions are made to be broken, but those who keep them grow stronger, was an invitation to deepen the disciple's self-awareness. By forcing himself to remain silent, the disciple was learning not just to stop speaking, but to observe and question his inner world. It was a lesson in discipline and introspection. Silence isn't just about avoiding words, it's about turning inward and confronting the noise in our own minds. In the Buddhist practice of vipassana meditation, practitioners often spend days or weeks in complete silence. The practice is designed not only to foster a deep awareness of the present moment, but also to help practitioners confront the inner turmoil that emerges when external distractions are removed. The silence forces them to observe their thoughts without becoming attached to them. This can be an incredibly painful process. But it's through this struggle that deeper wisdom and peace can be found. 4. The quiet transformation, realizing the true power of silence. By the end of the month, the disciple had managed to keep his vow of silence. But it wasn't just about refraining from speaking. Through his silence, he had experienced a profound transformation. He had been forced to confront his internal noise, the thoughts, judgments, and insecurities he had spent his whole life avoiding. When he finally returned to the Guru, he was no longer the same person. He was calm, centered, and at peace. The disciple's return wasn't just about his outward silence, it was about a deeper, more profound inner silence. He had learned that true silence wasn't just about avoiding words, but about finding peace within. This is the same lesson learned by many great figures in history. The Indian sage Mahatma Gandhi, for example, often practiced silence, or Raman as a means to reconnect with his inner self. For Gandhi, silence was a way to find clarity and strength amidst the chaos of the world around him. Similarly, the disciple's journey through silence had led him to a deeper understanding of the world and himself. He had learned to listen, not just to others, but to himself and to the world around him. True silence, he discovered, is not the absence of sound, but the presence of inner peace. When we embrace silence in our own lives, we too can experience this transformation. In a world filled with distractions and noise, silence becomes a rare and valuable gift. It is in silence that we can hear ourselves clearly, without the interference of external voices or expectations. Silence allows us to connect with the deeper parts of our consciousness, where true wisdom and peace reside. Like the disciple, when we learn to be silent, both outwardly and inwardly, we can experience the world in a more profound and meaningful way. Lessons from the story. The story of the disciple highlights several profound lessons about silence. It teaches us that silence is not simply the absence of speech, but an active process of listening to our inner world, to our thoughts, emotions, and to the world around us. It also reminds us that our urge to speak often comes from a place of insecurity and the need for validation. Silence, on the other hand, helps us confront and understand these insecurities. Finally, the story teaches us that true peace comes from within. It is not about avoiding the external world, but about learning to listen deeply to both the world and ourselves. Silence is a tool for self-discovery, a path to inner strength and clarity. The more we embrace silence, the more we can experience the richness of life in its purest form. 5. The silence that speaks, a shift in perspective. After the disciples' month of silence, something remarkable happened. When he returned to the ashram, his presence was noticeably different. He was not the same talkative, restless person who had left. The peace that radiated from him was unmistakable. His silence had transformed him. And it wasn't just about the words he had refrained from speaking. It was about the profound change in his energy and mindset. The disciple had learned something powerful: silence, both inner and outer, can be a catalyst for deep transformation. He had spent the month with his thoughts, feeling the discomfort of being alone with them. Over time, he had learned to observe, rather than react to, his mental chatter. He discovered that silence wasn't just a way to avoid external noise. It was a tool for cultivating clarity and self-awareness. In today's world, we often feel pressured to fill every moment with sound. whether through conversation, entertainment, or social media. This constant noise can drown out our inner voice and prevent us from reflecting on what truly matters. But as the disciple learned, silence isn't an absence, it's a presence. It's an opportunity to connect with ourselves and the world on a deeper level. 6. The inner peace, understanding the freedom of silence. When the disciple approached his guru after his period of silence, he confessed that he had learned the true meaning of inner silence. He no longer felt the compulsion to speak in order to assert himself or gain validation. The constant noise inside him had diminished, and he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He realized that he had been speaking not to communicate, but to fill a void within himself. This realization speaks to something many of us overlook: the inner silence we seek externally. We often look for peace in the world around us, in the noise and distractions we create or encounter. But true peace is found when we turn inward. The renowned author Eckhart Tolle, in his book The Power of Now, explains that the mind is often clouded with unnecessary noise, and true peace can only be found when we quiet that mental chatter. When we silence our thoughts, we can experience the present moment more fully, without the constant pull of past regrets or future anxieties. Tolle's teachings resonate with the disciple's experience. Only when he ceased speaking and confronted the chaos within could he discover peace. The disciple's silence enabled him to listen more clearly to the world around him. He began to notice the beauty of simple sounds: the wind in the trees, the rustling of leaves, the distant chirping of birds. These sounds, which he had once ignored, became an essential part of his newfound awareness. In the same way, when we quiet our minds, we begin to notice the richness of the world around us. In the absence of mental clutter, we are able to hear the whispers of life's deeper truths. This is not just a philosophical idea, but a practical experience. Many meditation practices encourage silence not just as a form of discipline, but as a way to reconnect with the world in its purest form. 7. The illusion of constant communication, the cost of overtalking. As the disciple returned to his fellow disciples and began interacting with them, he noticed something strange. Even though they spoke freely, there was a sense of disconnect. They continued to talk without truly communicating. The disciple realized that excessive speech often serves as a barrier to true understanding. It's easy to talk, but much harder to truly listen and connect. This is a profound lesson for us in the modern world, where communication is abundant but meaningful conversation is rare. Social media, for instance, has given everyone a platform to express their thoughts. But often these thoughts are fragmented, superficial, and disconnected from deeper meanings. People talk, but they rarely listen. This can create a sense of alienation and isolation, even in the midst of constant communication. Take, for example, the public figure and author Tim Ferriss, who advocates for the power of deep listening in conversations. Ferriss explains that most people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. The disciple in the story had learned the power of silence not just as a personal discipline but as a form of truly connecting with others. When we talk less, we listen more. And in that listening, we find true understanding. The disciple's silence taught him to value the power of listening. He realized that silence wasn't a void, it was a space for true connection. For a deeper level of communication that went beyond words. He had learned that the more we speak, the more we often lose touch with what's truly important. 8. Silence and the Path to Wisdom, the Buddha's Teachings. The Buddha himself often spoke about the importance of silence in cultivating wisdom. In the Dhammapada, one of the most well-known Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha says, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." This teaching highlights the power of mindful speech, the idea that silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of intentional, thoughtful communication. The disciple's journey mirrors the Buddha's teachings. His initial discomfort with silence led to a deeper understanding of the mind and its tendencies. As he learned to observe his thoughts without reacting, he moved closer to the path of wisdom and inner peace. The Buddha's practice of noble silence was not just a personal choice, but a way to cultivate mindfulness and clarity in all aspects of life. Many spiritual traditions emphasize the power of silence, recognizing that in the quiet moments, we can access deeper layers of understanding. The silence that the disciple experienced wasn't an escape from life, it was an embrace of it. By silencing his outer world, he could finally listen to the deeper currents of life, the subtler, more profound truths that are often drowned out by the noise of everyday existence. 9. The Journey Within, Silence as the Path to Self-Realization. At the end of the story, the disciple had not only mastered the art of silence but had also discovered its transformative power. He realized that true silence was not just a temporary state, but a way of being. It was about listening, not just to the world, but to the deeper truth within himself. This final realization is an essential lesson. The journey inward requires silence, not just in words, but in thought and action. When we practice silence, we allow ourselves to connect with our deepest selves, to listen to our intuition and inner wisdom. In this space of stillness, we can begin to understand our true nature, free from the noise of ego and societal expectations. The ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "Silence is a source of great strength." This resonates deeply with the disciple's experience. It was only when he embraced silence that he discovered a strength that he had not known existed. Silence allowed him to access a deeper level of understanding of himself, the world, and the nature of his thoughts and desires. This strength, however, is not the strength to dominate or control, but the strength to understand, to be present, and to let go. It is the strength that arises from inner peace and self-realization. As we continue on our own journeys, we too can find this strength by embracing the power of silence. The lessons of silence. The story of the disciple teaches us profound lessons on the power of silence. Silence isn't merely the absence of sound, it is a powerful tool for self-discovery, transformation, and deeper connection. Through silence, we learn to listen, not just to others, but to ourselves. We confront the noise of our minds and discover the peace that lies beneath it. And we learn that true wisdom comes not from speaking, but from listening and understanding. The disciple's journey shows us that silence is not just a personal discipline, but a path to wisdom and clarity. In a world that values constant communication, silence becomes a rare and valuable tool. one that allows us to step back from the noise and connect with our deepest truths. When we learn to be silent, we can experience the world and ourselves in a way that is richer, deeper, and more meaningful. Practical applications of silence in our modern lives. In our fast-paced, noisy world, silence can often seem like a luxury. It feels hard to find amidst constant distractions and social pressures. Yet, as ancient teachings suggest, silence holds the key to deeper self-understanding. In a society that glorifies noise and activity, silence becomes even more profound. So, how can we incorporate silence into our daily lives to enhance clarity, reduce stress, and improve relationships? Here's how to apply the power of silence practically. 1. Silence in family conflicts, listening to understand, not to respond. Family conflicts often benefit from silence. In arguments, we quickly become defensive, trying to prove our point. But this often escalates tension. Real-life example: imagine a disagreement with a family member. Instead of rushing to speak, stay silent for a moment. Listen carefully to their perspective. This doesn't mean agreeing, but giving them space to express themselves. Silence helps you listen deeply, without interrupting or preparing a response. This leads to empathy and a more constructive dialogue. Experts like Marshall Rosenberg emphasize that silence allows us to understand the emotions behind words. When practiced, it shifts us from reacting impulsively to responding thoughtfully. 2. Silence at work, gaining insights and contributing more effectively. At work, there's pressure to speak up and share ideas. But silence can be even more powerful at times. Pausing to listen first allows for better contributions. Real-life example: during a meeting, everyone is throwing out ideas. Instead of speaking immediately, take a moment to pause. This allows you to assess the situation and offer a fresh insight. Leaders like Warren Buffett are known for their ability to listen more than they speak. They understand that silence fosters reflection and better decisions. Silence at work promotes better decision-making and communication. By practicing it, we create space for deeper insights and more effective contributions. 3. Silence in social interactions, creating deeper connections. In the digital age, we feel pressure to talk constantly. Yet, silence can lead to more meaningful, authentic interactions. Real-life example: at a social event, instead of feeling the need to fill every moment with conversation, allow moments of silence. These pauses help you understand the dynamics and make the other person feel heard. Silence shows you are fully present, engaged, and interested. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi used silence for reflection and deeper connection with others. Gandhi's silence wasn't about withdrawing, it was about cultivating a stronger connection to the world. 4. Silence in meditation and mindfulness, clearing the mental clutter. Silence is central to meditation and mindfulness practices. It helps clear mental noise and creates a peaceful, focused mind. Real-life example: in meditation, silence fosters self-awareness. By setting aside time each day to meditate, you learn to observe your thoughts without judgment. This practice reduces stress, enhances focus, and promotes overall well-being. Studies show that just a few minutes of silent meditation can sharpen mental clarity. By practicing silence, we step back from our thoughts and develop a deeper connection to the present moment. 5. Silence in decision-making, gaining clarity and perspective. In decision-making, silence helps us avoid hasty choices. Pausing to reflect gives us clarity and perspective. Real-life example, facing a major life decision? Take a moment of silence to reflect on your desires and priorities. This time away from emotional rush helps you make more thoughtful decisions. Steve Jobs, known for his periods of silence and solitude, would often take long walks to clear his mind and find solutions. Silence helps us step back and evaluate all our options before taking action. 6. Silence in personal growth, cultivating inner peace and self-reflection. The most profound application of silence is in personal growth. Silence provides space to reflect on actions, thoughts, and emotions. Real-life example, when life feels overwhelming. Instead of reacting with more noise, practice silence. Whether through deep breathing, journaling, or stillness, silence helps you realign with inner peace. By integrating silence into our routines, we cultivate self-awareness, peace, and emotional resilience. Silence becomes a form of self-care, supporting us through life's ups and downs. Conclusion: the quiet power of silence. In today's world, silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a tool for personal growth, deeper connections, and clearer decision-making. Amid the noise and distractions of life, silence lets us reconnect with our true selves. Whether in family conflicts, work settings, or moments of reflection, silence can be transformative. By embracing it, we create space for clarity, peace, and understanding in all areas of life. The power of silence isn't something reserved for monks or retreat centers. It's a tool that anyone can integrate into their daily life to unlock deeper clarity, better decision-making, and more meaningful connections. Whether in a family argument, at work, or in moments of personal reflection, silence gives us the space to pause, listen, and respond with greater intention. It's not about saying less. It's about being more present, more aware, and more connected to our true selves. If you found these insights helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Buddhist Balance channel. By embracing the power of silence, we can all move closer to a life of balance, clarity, and peace. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.